The cell was small, rectangular, and sterile, walls of cold alloy reflecting the pale glow of embedded lights. Gunnery Sergeant Mason Reeve sat with his back against the far corner, his wrists bound in plasma cuffs that shimmered faintly with potential violence. His boots were gone. So were his weapons, his armor, and his HUD interface. But none of that really mattered. Not to someone like Reeve. Not to a Marine. Across the room, a security drone hovered silently in the upper corner, its cyclopean red eye recording every twitch of muscle and breath. They didn't understand what they were looking at. That much was obvious. No one on this ship, this Empire vessel sleek with arrogance and order, understood what Reeve was or what he had been forged to do. The door hissed open with mechanical precision. A figure entered, tall and thin, draped in a charcoal gray uniform that bore the angular insignia of the Galactic Empire. His face was sharp, almost elegant, with violet eyes that flickered with measured disdain. He carried a datapad and the unmistakable air of a bureaucrat who believed control was permanent. Mason Reeve, the man said, pronouncing the name as though it were unfamiliar, unworthy. Human male. Planet of origin, Terra. Former military designation, United States Marine Corps, Scout Sniper Division. Reeve said nothing. His gaze was level, unblinking. The officer continued, tapping his pad. Captured on Alcarin Delta, following an unauthorized infiltration of a Tier 3 Empire outpost. No active identification codes. No digital signature. You're a ghost, Sergeant. That makes people nervous. Still nothing. The officer stepped closer, lowering the datapad. Let's dispense with pretense. I know you're not here by accident. You were surgically inserted into a high-security zone, carrying a neural chip encoded in a pre-imperial cipher. You killed 6 sentries with non-Empire-issued ordnance. That takes planning, discipline, training. Reeve looked past him to the wall, where a faint hairline crack ran diagonally through the alloy. He was cataloging every detail, every inch of the cell, every shift in ambient temperature. Marines were trained to be still without being idle. The officer tilted his head. You haven't spoken since capture. We've run biometric scans. Your vitals suggest you're operating within total cognitive control. So here's the question I can't answer. Why hasn't someone like you been cataloged in our datanet? You're a relic, an anomaly. Reeve finally spoke, his voice low and razor sharp. You're asking the wrong questions. The officer froze for a half second, just long enough to reveal that he wasn't entirely composed. Enlighten me. Reeve smiled, not with mirth, but with the unsettling calm of someone who had survived more than most could imagine. You should be asking what happens when a ghost starts hunting. The officer blinked, then turned sharply and exited. The door sealed behind him with a magnetic thud. The drone overhead whirred briefly, then resumed its silent surveillance. Reeve leaned his head back against the wall and exhaled slowly. He had accomplished part 1 of the plan. Get aboard. Get caught. Get inside. Now, came the harder part. What came next? Elsewhere on the ship, within the labyrinthine corridors of the Galactic Empire's flagship Chimera, Sub-Engineer First Class Tolan Virex moved between service conduits with a datapad tucked under one arm and a feigned look of exasperation. He was young, barely 25 cycles, with a narrow build and a face that had learned the value of looking unimportant. His gray technician's uniform bore just enough grease and wear to pass without scrutiny. But Virex wasn't just an engineer. He was the leak, and he was terrified. He had intercepted the prisoner's files only hours earlier. The moment he read the Marine's dossier, redacted lines, fragmented details, the curious absence of a digital trail, something in his gut twisted. No human looked like that in a capture photo. Wounded, bleeding, shackled, but staring into the camera as if it were prey. Virex wasn't brave. He hadn't joined the Empire out of ideology. He'd been recruited out of a mining colony and given a chance to rise beyond the dust. But the more he saw, the disappearing colonists, the black sites, the quiet screams buried under data logs, the more he realized what he was part of. He didn't have the skills to change anything. Not alone, but maybe a ghost could. He reached a maintenance junction just outside the brig. The auxiliary controls were technically off-limits, but with enough rerouted permissions, he could access the cell's environmental subroutines. Not to open it, but to initiate a cascade. A fire warning. A ventilation purge. A glitch severe enough to demand a protocol override. It wouldn't open the door, but might get Reeve moved. Virex worked quickly, fingers flying over the interface. Alarms couldn't be too loud. The detour couldn't seem intentional. Just enough to create a moment. An opening. Then came the siren. Subtle. A blinking yellow that danced across the corridor lights. He stepped back, heart racing. Down in the brig, Reeve heard it too. The red lights shifted to amber. The drone above him dimmed. Then, almost lazily, the door unsealed. 2 guards entered, flanked by a technician and a security mech. One guard gestured. Emergency override. We're relocating the prisoner to Station 2. Reeve stood without resistance. The cuffs were still active, but his gait was calm, unhurried. The mech moved behind him, servo limbs twitching slightly. In the hallway, Virex kept his head down, moving past the security team without a word. But as he passed, Reeve looked at him. A glance. 2 seconds. Enough. Reeve knew, and Virex kept walking, the weight of the moment sinking deep into his spine. The relocation corridor was long and mostly empty. Reeve counted the steps. 32 from the brig to the lift. 9 to the checkpoint. 3 from there to the transfer chamber. He moved on step 31. His hands flashed outward. The plasma cuffs snapped forward, over the guard's head, tight against the throat. The mech turned too slowly. Reeve kicked its leg backward, causing it to overbalance. He brought the first guard down, grabbing the man's pistol as he fell. The second guard reached for his weapon, but Reeve had already fired. Non-lethal. Shoulder shot. Screaming. Dropped. The technician ran. Reeve let him. The mech recovered, arms flaring, but Reeve fired again, this time into the power joint beneath the right eye. The machine sputtered and collapsed. He was armed now. Free. And inside the heart of the Empire's most secure vessel. Virex stood outside a corridor junction, having heard the muffled bursts. He didn't know what had happened, but he knew it had started. He opened his comm and sent one encrypted pulse. If the old human resistance was still listening, they just heard a call from the dark. Back in the corridor, Reeve moved fast, scavenging gear, mapping exits, pulling data from the bodies. The stolen pistol wouldn't last long. He needed better weapons. A map. An exfil route. But none of that mattered yet. He was inside. He was awake. And the Empire had no idea what they had just released. The hum of the Chimera's internal systems was faint, nearly imperceptible, an ever-present mechanical heartbeat. Gunnery Sergeant Mason Reeve sat cross-legged in his cell, eyes half-lidded, breathing shallow. Stillness was his ally. Since his capture, he had made no threats, issued no demands, and asked no questions. His silence had become a kind of weapon, one the Empire didn't know how to counter. Outside his translucent cell, Lieutenant Virex stood with arms folded, watching through the observation pane. He hadn't returned out of duty. Something about the prisoner had taken root in his thoughts. A man stripped of rank and weaponry, who still radiated danger like heat from a plasma core. Virex had read the reports, scoured the cultural logs on human warfare. The term Marine Scout Sniper meant something more than a title. It was a declaration. "You still haven't eaten," Virex said through the comm. Reeve didn't react. "Standard rations. are synthesized. I had fresh protein shipped from Ralcari Prime. You might like it. No movement. Virex stepped back, folding his hands behind his back. You know, we thought your species was extinct. The soul collapse, the diaspora, the silence across your colonies. We assumed you destroyed yourselves. But now, I think we misunderstood something fundamental. A flicker, subtle, but there. Reeve's gaze shifted by a fraction of a degree. Virex leaned in. You didn't go extinct. You went dark. For the first time, Reeve moved. Slowly, deliberately, he rose to his feet. His expression was unreadable, but his stance was a calculated presence. Not a prisoner, not a survivor, an operator still on mission. You're afraid, Reeve said finally, voice hoarse from disuse but steady as stone. Virex blinked. No, I'm intrigued. You should be afraid. The line went silent. Reeve sat again. It was enough for now. Elsewhere on the Chimera, a different conversation unfolded. Commander Cross, lead interrogator and Empire loyalist, stood before a holodeble projecting Reeve's biometrics. He's not breaking, said the empath, frustration leaking into its tone. His mental architecture is compartmentalized in a way I haven't seen. Decentralized memory recall. Layered trauma insulation. He doesn't think like we do. Cross's eyes narrowed. Or he doesn't think at all. Perhaps we've overestimated him. The empath pulsed with discomfort. He's not ordinary, and your young lieutenant has been speaking to him daily. Monitor him, and if the prisoner starts influencing him, Cross folded his arms. Then we isolate them both. Back in the cell, Reeve was already adjusting to the routine. He used the cell's dimensions to exercise, calisthenics in silence, slow and controlled. The food remained untouched. Hunger sharpened the mind, honed discipline. He wasn't here to survive comfortably. He was here to learn. Every day, Virex returned. He no longer brought food. Instead, he brought questions. What were you doing on Delta for? No answer. Why did you let them take you alive? Still nothing. Do you think the Empire is wrong? That won her in a glance. Virex seized on it. You think we're the villains. Reeve stood and approached the cell wall. The field shimmered faintly where he drew close. Villains, he said, believe they're righteous. You're worse. You convince yourselves there's no alternative. Virex didn't flinch. And what's your alternative? Reeve's voice was quiet, but it struck like a blade. Freedom. Not safety. Not unity. Just the right to be. You think freedom wins wars? No, but it makes losing them harder. The words lingered. Later that cycle, Cross intercepted Virex in the corridor. You're dismissed from the prisoner detail. Virex's brow furrowed. On whose authority? Mine. You're too close. I'm learning things. You're compromising yourself. Or, I'm making progress. Cross's voice dropped. You've begun to see him as a person. That's dangerous. Virex didn't answer. Inside the cell, Reeve noticed the absence immediately. The daily rhythm was broken, and that meant the pattern had shifted. He tested the magnetic floor again, less resistance than before. The power fluctuations were increasing. Something was changing. 2 guards came that evening. They wore full exo armor and carried stun rifles at low ready. No words, just a gesture. Reeve complied. They led him through narrow maintenance corridors, far from the main halls, away from observation. It was too quiet. Ambush. The first shot came fast and low, aimed for his spine. Reeve dropped, twisted, swept the leg. 1 guard hit the floor with a grunt. The second raised his rifle, but Reeve was already moving, striking the power junction on the wall with his elbow. Sparks exploded, blinding light cascading through the narrow tunnel. He rolled under the guard's wild shot, seized the man's wrist, and drove it into the wall. The rifle clattered away. 3 seconds later, both guards were unconscious. Reeve paused, not to flee but to think. If this was an execution, it had been clumsy. That meant unsanctioned. Someone wanted him gone quietly. He dragged the bodies into a dark alcove, stripped one of the stun batons, and vanished into the maintenance shaft. Elsewhere, Virex argued with Cross. "He's gone." Virex's voice was sharp, disbelief twisted with anger. "You think I had something to do with that?" Cross snapped. "I think someone wanted him silenced. Which means he's more important than you've admitted." Cross scowled. "He's a relic, a distraction. Then why are you so desperate to be rid of him?" Alarm sounded. Emergency klaxons. The ship shifted course. Cross turned toward the central console. "Track him. Lock down all sublevels." But it was too late. Reeve moved like water through the Chimera's underbelly. He mapped the layout as he went, noting junctions, vents, pressure points. He didn't need to escape yet. He needed information. In a forgotten storage bay, he found a terminal. Unsecured. They'd underestimated how fast he could learn alien systems. He parsed the UI, navigated security logs, ship manifests, and internal communication chains. Then he saw it, Project Vanguard, a classified initiative. Coordinates, human colony names, and worse, deployment schedules. They weren't studying humanity. They were preparing to eliminate the last survivors. He copied the data to a neural chip salvaged from a nearby droid. There was no time for deeper analysis. He had a mission again. He was turning to leave when a shadow appeared in the doorway. Virex. They stared at each other for a beat too long. Reeve didn't raise his weapon. "I didn't come to stop you," Virex said quietly. "I came to see if you were right. You saw the logs? I've suspected for a while. I just didn't have proof." Reeve studied him. "Why are you here?" "Because I believe you can do what I can't." "And what's that?" "Fight back." Footsteps echoed in the corridor behind Virex. They were out of time. Reeve moved past him. "This ends in fire." "I know. Help me get off this ship." Virex nodded once. "There's a maintenance shuttle. Unmanned. Launch Bay 3. They ran. Behind them, the alarms were doubled. Reeve didn't look back. He never did. The hunt had begun. And now, he wasn't alone. The launch bay loomed ahead, bathed in emergency red lighting that pulsed like the throb of a wounded beast. Sirens wailed overhead, echoing off the metal walls, disorienting and shrill. Gunnery Sergeant Mason Reeve kept low, moving with surgical precision along the catwalk's edge. Behind him, Lieutenant Virex followed, visibly shaken but committed. The younger man's breathing was shallow, adrenaline pushing him beyond his comfort zone. He wasn't a soldier, not in the way Reeve was, but he had chosen a side now, and it was too late to go back. Below them, in the docking bay's open floor, crews scurried like insects. Empire Marines locked down terminals. Engineers scrambled to secure atmospheric seals, and drones buzzed in erratic flight patterns. Reeve's eyes scanned for the maintenance shuttle Virex had mentioned. Row 3, Base 6. A small craft, unimpressive and squat. "Perfect. Eyes on it," Reeve murmured. Virex nodded. "Flight controls are local. I can unlock it. You've got 30 seconds." They dropped from the catwalk into the shadows of a freight stacker. Reeve led the way, movements smooth and economical. Virex kept close, heart hammering in his ears. They passed 2 technicians who never saw them coming. Reeve's stun baton snapped twice. Soft pops of energy, 2 bodies crumpling silently. At the shuttle door, Virex accessed a recessed panel and keyed in his override. The interface blinked green. "It's set," he whispered. "But we've got a problem." Reeve didn't need to ask. The air was changing. Behind them, a column of armored soldiers was forming. Cross's men, armed and alert. A full lockdown team. "You go," Virex said quickly. "Get off this ship. Get that data out. You're coming with me. I'll only slow you down. And they'll chase me before they realize you're gone." Reeve studied him for a beat. "You're not trained for this." "No," Virex said with a faint, sad smile. "But maybe I can still be useful." Reeve gripped his shoulder, breathed firm, then he vanished into the shuttle. Virex turned and ran into the open, arms raised, shouting, "He's headed for Base 7. He's in the drone shuttle." The squad pivoted instantly. Half of them followed him. Inside the cockpit, Reeve initiated launch protocol. The shuttle powered up with a deep thrumming hum. As the hangar doors peeled open, he guided the vessel into the void, slipping through the breach before the defense net could activate. The Chimera shrank behind him, a monstrous silhouette against the stars. In his lap, the neural chip gleamed. Now the real work began. The nearest habitable colony was 6 light days away. Reeve angled the shuttle toward the vector and engaged the sublight engine. FDL was locked out. This was, after all, a maintenance vehicle. But time wasn't the primary concern anymore. The data he carried, names, dates, fleet movements, was enough to dismantle half a dozen Empire operations. But not alone. He spent the next hours poring over the decrypted logs. Patterns emerged. Covert actions dressed up as diplomatic expansions, colony surveys that coincided with planetary sterilizations, black site installations across former human sectors. But what chilled him most were the entries marked Engagement Class Red, Solar Origin Combatants. They knew. They had been hunting Marines. He uploaded a message beacon using the shuttle's emergency relay, encoded with human encryption, barely recognizable to modern scanners. One word: alive. The beacon launched into the void. Then, without warning, the cockpit lights flickered. A pulse rippled through the console. Something was overriding the NAV systems. Reeve's jaw tightened. The shuttle jerked violently to starboard. A tractor beam. The viewport filled with a new shape. A sleek vessel. Unfamiliar. No Empire markings. Compact. Silent. Predatory. Not Empire. The shuttle docked with the larger ship automatically. Reeve stood, grabbed the stun baton, and waited by the hatch. It hissed open. 2 figures entered, weapons drawn, but their armor was different. Matte, reinforced, adorned with a single sigil, an old Earth eagle, stylized into an angular silhouette. "Stand down," one of them said. Reeve didn't move. The other removed her helmet, short crop hair, a scar along her jaw. "Gunnery, Sergeant Reeve?" His grip loosened slightly. "Who's asking?" "Captain Alina Valera." For a moment, the silence was thunderous. "You were declared Kia," he said. "Not dead. Just very busy." They stared at each other, disbelief and recognition warring behind stoic faces. Then a nod passed between them. An old Marine nod, carved from shared history. "We picked up your beacon," she said. Didn't believe it. Had to see for ourselves. Reeve passed her the chip. "They're planning a purge." Valera's expression darkened. "We know. We've seen the edges of it. But this changes everything." Her second in command lowered his weapon. "We have a base hidden on Bellerophon 3. Resistance is growing." "Resistance?" Reeve asked. Valera grinned. "Turns out people don't like being ruled." She turned and motioned him toward the corridor. "Come on, Gunny. War's not over yet." As they moved through the ship, Reeve noted the crew. Mostly human, but with a few non-human faces, species the Empire had oppressed, now fighting back. Engineers, tacticians, former smugglers. A makeshift army. They reached the bridge. "We intercepted a transmission," Valera said, tapping the console. "Virex made it off the Chimera." "Barely. He's in hiding, feeding us intel." "You made an impression." Reeve nodded once. "He'll be useful. We've been hitting small convoys, outposts. Surgical strikes. Now, with this data," she tapped the chip, "we can finally go bigger. Coordinated strikes. Disrupt the whole theater. Reeve said. We need your help. Sniper teams, infiltration, forward recon. Your kind of work. He looked out the viewport, where stars streaked by. His reflection in the glass was harder now, thinner, more angular, sharpened by silence and solitude. You'll have it, he said. Good. Valera smiled grimly. Because the galaxy's about to remember what Marines are. The bridge quieted. The future had found its vanguard. And this time, humanity wasn't hiding anymore. The old base on Bellerophon 3 was carved into the bones of a dead moon. Once a mining outpost abandoned after the collapse of Sol's Reach, it had since become a fortress hidden behind debris fields and electromagnetic interference. From orbit, it appeared as little more than a rock scarred by time. Beneath the surface, however, it pulsed with preparation. Reeve moved through the narrow corridors in silence, eyes scanning walls that hummed with improvised tech. The base was a monument to ingenuity. Salvaged equipment from forgotten wars, hybrid systems powered by alien cores, and personnel drawn from the scattered remnants of a galaxy that had forgotten what rebellion looked like. They hadn't just built a hideout. They'd built a war machine stitched from desperation and memory. Captain Valera walked beside him, issuing updates as they passed different stations. We've integrated your data. We now have confirmed locations on 4 high-risk Empire installations, weapon depots, relay satellites, and most importantly, a black site breeding station. Reeve's brow furrowed. Breeding for engineered soldiers. They've been building replacements. Not conscripts. Hybrids. Fast-grown, indoctrinated. Accelerated war assets, Reeve said grimly. They're not just killing humanity, Valera added. They're trying to replace it. They entered the central ops chamber. A cluster of officers and specialists stood at attention before a holographic display of star systems and blinking red targets. Among them, Virex sat hunched over a console, eyes shadowed by fatigue but sharp with focus. When he saw Reeve, he stood and offered a tight nod. Glad to see you made it. Glad to see you survived, Reeve replied. Virex's voice was quieter, almost confessional. I couldn't stay. Not after what I saw. You didn't run, Reeve said. You defected. There's a difference. Valera stepped forward. The Empires moved up the schedule. They planned to hit Eridanus Prime within a week. 2 billion people. No warning. We stop this. We ignite something bigger than just sabotage. A murmur passed through the room. Reeve examined the map. Where's the weakness? Valera pointed. Here. Central comm, relay in orbit. If we can shut it down, we delay the strike long enough to extract and arm the colony. And hit the breeding facility at the same time, Reeve said. Divide their attention. He turned toward the gathered resistance members. We do this clean. Silent entry, controlled demolitions. No heroics. Virex stepped forward. I want in. Reeve gave him a hard look. You're not a combatant. I know their protocols. Their security handshakes. I can get us through their gates before they even realize we're not supposed to be there. Valera watched the exchange without interruption. Reeve finally nodded. You stay close. No improvising. Virex smiled. Wouldn't dream of it. The plan solidified over the next few hours. Strike teams divided across objectives. Reeve's squad would infiltrate the breeding station's control tower. Valera would lead the orbital relay assault. Virex would ride with Reeve, providing access through internal defense nets. Before launch, Reeve stood in the armory, staring at the sniper rifle laid out before him. It wasn't standard Marine issue. No such weapons existed anymore. It was a hybrid, human steel, alien alloys, electromagnetic stabilization. A rifle born of 2 eras, designed by ghosts for those who refused to be buried. He lifted it and felt the weight settle into his bones like a memory. He slung it over his shoulder and adjusted the visor integrated into his armor's HUD. In the mirror, he didn't see a fugitive. He saw a Marine. The drop ship descended fast, punching through atmosphere like a dagger. Heat flared across the hull. Clouds peeled away to reveal the forested world of Eridanus Prime. Beyond the trees, nestled in silver canyons, the Empire facility spread like a wound, geometric and sterile. The landing zone was half a kilometer from the perimeter. Reeve disembarked first, rifle in hand, his squad moving silently behind him. Virex followed, eyes wide but steady. The forest swallowed them quickly. They moved in silence. No comms, no chatter. Only hand signals and instinct. At the fence, Virex stepped forward, interfacing with a disguise panel. Lights blinked, then faded. "We're in," he whispered. They passed through the breach and entered the outer compound. The facility was quiet, too quiet. Surveillance turrets hummed, blind to their presence thanks to Virex's codes. Reeve counted 15 seconds between each patrol drone cycle. He moved on the 16th. Inside, the hallways glowed with the blue light of Empire technology. Holograms flickered to life as they passed, unaware of their deception. Virex directed them through maintenance corridors and forgotten junctions. Then they reached the control tower. 2 guards stood at the base. Reeve raised his rifle. 2 soft cracks. 2 bodies hit the floor. They climbed. At the top, they breached the command room. Engineers scrambled, alarms half-triggered before silenced. Reeve moved through them like wind. Non-lethal where possible, fatal where necessary. Virex locked the doors behind them. At the console, Reeve inserted the modified neural chip. A virus uploaded into the command node. Screens flickered. The breeding tanks began to shut down, stasis fluids draining. Alarms screamed. "They know," Virex said. "We're almost done," Reeve replied. A second team radioed in. Valera's group had neutralized the orbital relay. Eridanus was safe. For now. Then the ground trembled. Heavy boots in the stairwell. "We got incoming," Virex said, backing toward the far wall. "Set the charges," Reeve ordered. "Then go." "I'm not leaving you." "That wasn't a request." Virex hesitated, then nodded, moving to the preset demolition points. Reeve covered the door, counting each breath. The first enemy breached. Reeve fired. The hallway exploded in a hail of energy. Smoke choked the air. Reeve moved, fast and ruthless, but there were too many. A blast threw him back against the console. Pain lanced his ribs. He stood anyway. Virex returned. Charges set. Time. 30 seconds. Get to the evac point. "I'm not." Reeve turned and shoved the detonator into his hand. "You have the intel. You're the reason this matters. Go." Virex stared, eyes wide, then turned and vanished through the emergency shaft. Reeve turned back to the breach, rifle raised. The last thing he saw was the Empire crest painted on their armor. Then everything went white. The Resistance ship picked up Virex 6 kilometers from the blast zone. The charges had leveled the facility. No survivors were found. In the days that followed, the data Reeve recovered ignited a wave of uprisings. Colonies once silent raised banners. Former officers turned rogue. Whole fleets went dark, defecting to the cause. The Empire scrambled to contain what it no longer fully controlled. In every whisper of rebellion, one name was spoken. Marine. Not a title. A warning. Captain Valera stood on the bridge, watching stars bend around her ship's bow. Virex stood beside her, holding the battered dog tags Reeve had left behind. He knew what it would cost, Valera said quietly. Virex nodded, and he paid it anyway. She turned to him. "You still believe you're not a soldier?" He looked down at the tags. "I think I'm starting to learn." The stars stretched ahead, and somewhere, far beyond the reach of tyranny, War was beginning to mean something again.